What a beautiful morning. I wonder what the pigs are up to. They have really cleared this place out. Howdy, pickers. You guys are eating dirt for dessert after your breakfast, aren't you? What's the best dessert? I can tell by your dirty snouts. This is a nice looking batch of pigs, if I do say so myself. I might be a little biased though. Hi, I'm Pete and welcome to Just a Few Acres Farm. I'm going to mix it up a little bit today. Well, first of all, we're going to go mix up the hay, and I see about a 38.2% chance that the hay is going to be dry by the end of the day, and then it's supposed to rain tomorrow and the next day. So in this video, we'll see how that goes. And I'm also going to talk about GMO crops a little bit and raising animals using GMOs and tell y'all what I know about the whole issue. And it's certainly not simple. So let's get going. About 45 degrees this morning. She started right up. We'll let her warm up for a few minutes before we switch her over to diesel. This has been terrible hay drying weather. Heavy dews, cold temperatures at night. Cool temperatures during the day in the 60s, cloudiness, yeah. So, last hay of the season. Oh yeah. I gotta drive through this pasture to get to the field over there, but look at how much dew is down. See how wet the tires are? Here we are. Old man, old machine. Seems about right to me. I've been tedding this hay every day to try and get it dry, and what happens is, you can see, it's not dry yet. What happens is when the dew falls on it at night, it packs it down, and then the air can't get through it as well. So first thing in the morning I get out here, fluff it all up so that the air can get through it, and it helps flick that dew off of the grass, and hopefully the dew burns off quicker. I don't know. I guess the good news is today it's supposed to be nice sunshine up in here and not a lot of clouds. Here we go. Gotta take the brake off. Here we go. Look at the water coming off the tines. Wowie. It's wet. Life's short, and we only get so many beautiful mornings like this. I'm thankful for everyone. That sun is warm when you're in it. We'll go back and check the hay later, but first, I want to show you something. These are broad-breasted white turkeys, and they are a product of selective breeding. And they're really barking today. Selective breeding is when you breed animals together that both have desired traits that you're trying to increase in their offspring. So over time, broad-breasted white turkeys were bred to be bigger and bigger and grow faster and faster. And now we're left with this variety here that grows to about 12-pound dress weight in about 12 weeks, a pound a week. It's pretty amazing. These are Cornish Rock Cross broiler chickens. These Cornish Cross chickens are the animal equivalent of a hybrid vegetable. This breed is created by crossing a commercial Cornish chicken with a white rock, and the result is a fast-growing chicken that reaches a 4-pound dress weight in about 7 weeks. The consequence of this hybrid breeding is they can't produce viable offspring. They just get too heavy too fast to breed and lay eggs. We have two different things going on here, and these are things that happen in the plant world as well as the animal world. We have selective breeding, and a good example of that in the plant world is corn. The ears of corn before we started selective breeding were about this big, and over thousands of years we bred together the plants that exhibited the biggest ears, and now we have ears of corn that are this big. It's been going on forever with all kinds of different crops. Hybrids, on the other hand, are something fairly recent where it's a very controlled process where you cross two varieties of a plant to create offspring that exhibit beneficial qualities or desired qualities of both those plants. The consequence is that usually the offspring from a hybrid is not as viable as the hybrid was. Its productivity goes way down. So if you grow hybrid tomatoes and you leave them to reseed the next year, you don't get as many or as big of tomatoes on that plant. So selective breeding's been around for millennia, and hybrids have been around for, I don't know exactly, but a long time. I would say at least 100 years since we figured that out. GMOs, on the other hand, are something completely different. GMO stands for genetically modified organism, and different from either selective breeding or hybrid breeding, crossbreeding. A GMO is made in a laboratory by splicing genes or segments of genes into a plant to make it exhibit some trait that you couldn't achieve via crossbreeding or hybridization. And those genes that they're splicing in come from other plants not of the same variety, or they come from animals, or they come from bacteria, or they come from viruses. This is something that wouldn't ever occur in nature. Yes, maybe with the right radiation that mutation may occur eventually, but that's like telling 10,000 chimpanzees to write Romeo and Juliet and waiting around for one to hit the right keys on the typewriter. It's a long shot. Science has developed a lot of field crop GMOs, and I'll scroll all of them across the bottom of the screen, or maybe I should be scrolling this way. The most prevalent type of GMOs are what's called Roundup Ready GMOs, and this is things like corn and soybeans that you can apply glyphosate to, a broad spectrum herbicide, and the plant is immune to that herbicide. So the plant does fine, you kill off all the weeds. It's supposed to increase yield because it reduces weed pressure. Well, it's 11:30, the dew burned off about an hour ago, so I'm gonna go down and ted the hay a second time. It smells like hay now. Let me show you the difference. Here's the first row I tedded, these two right here, and then this is the stuff I haven't tedded yet. See how fluffy the stuff that I tedded is? Air can get through it and dry it a lot faster. This is the stuff that I haven't tedded yet, but I tedded this morning. See how flat it is? You want to fluff it up and get the air through it. Now, tedding this dry is not something I would ever do, except in an extreme case like this where I'm facing rain. The problem is every time you ted hay, you're tedding less of it because you lose a certain amount of it due to breakage, and it winds up getting left on the ground when you make hay. Getting close to being dry enough, but the clouds are rolling in, so I don't know. There goes a hawk, caught a mouse. There's lots of concerns out there about using GMOs, all kinds of concerns. I'm going to go through them one by one. Concern number one, health effects of eating GMOs. I know there's a lot out there that it causes organ damage, kidney failure, reproductive problems. Well, I tend to look at the science, and I favor peer-reviewed scientific papers for the information I get. And there was one study way back when by the Institute for Responsible Technology where they found that rats fed a diet containing GMO potato had organ system damage. Hundreds of other researchers have tried to duplicate these results, and they've bred rats and mice through generations and generations and found absolutely no damage from eating GMOs. Now, I know that this isn't conclusive because it's not people, it's rats and mice, and I understand that, but I can't find anything in science that confirms some of the claims being made. I think that a lot of them are circumstantial, so some people will say autism is going up and diabetes and you name the disease in the years since GMOs have become prevalent. Well, that's a chance correlation. It's not a direct causation because our diets have changed extremely in the last 30 years, coinciding with the plentiful food supply, partly to do with GMOs. Food is cheap, we're eating too much of it, and we're eating the wrong things, and it's causing higher risk of certain diseases. Well, that's it for the second tedding of the day. I think this hay may be ready to bale this afternoon. We'll let it dry for a couple hours and then rake it up. The other health concern is with glyphosate, the herbicide that's used with a lot of GMO crops, and literally the jury is still out on that one. I mean, I'm sure you've heard about the lawsuits against Monsanto and other companies from workers who worked with this. There does appear to be some kind of correlation with long-term exposure to it, but the science isn't there yet. There is no study that proves conclusively that glyphosate in our diet or as a working exposure does anything harmful, at least that I know of. And remember, I'm looking at peer-reviewed science, not conjecture or circumstantial evidence. It seems like with GMOs and glyphosate, there's a lot of gray area, and I've said in many videos that the world is not just black or white. There's a lot of nuance in between, and GMOs are one of them. It's been studied for generations on rats and mice. Has it been studied for generations on human yet? Well, no, we don't reproduce as fast as mice do. So we're kind of human guinea pigs, and yes, that concerns me because we're feeding ourselves genetic material that is not natural. It's been created in a lab. But there's one part that I think is flat out goofball, I guess is the words that I would use, that somehow eating animal meat and the animal ate GMOs is equivalent to you eating GMOs. It's just not. Genetic material isn't transferred through the animal meat to you. So if the animal's eating GMOs, you're not going to have the same issues with the effects of the GMOs as the animal itself would experience. You're once removed. It's like saying that eating brains is going to make your brain bigger. That material doesn't transfer. It's 3 in the afternoon. Dad just went down with the H to start raking, and I'm going to follow him with the baler. I got to wait for Dad to put some windrows down before I can start baling, so I'll just sit here and watch him for a while. I know what I can do while I'm waiting. I can tell you some jokes. Hey, what do Alexander the Great and Winnie the Pooh have in common? Same middle name. What do you call a woman who sets fire to all of her bills? Give up? Bernadette. Bernadette. But what about the glyphosate? If the animal eats a GMO that has glyphosate residue on it, the herbicide, is that animal transferring the glyphosate into its meat and into you as a second party to that GMO? You know what? I doubt it. But again, I don't have any scientific evidence. It just really seems like a stretch that something from an herbicide would wind up in the meat. But who knows? Concern number 2, how is the use of genetically modified organisms affecting our environment? And this is something that I've always been very concerned about. When you're growing GMOs, you're reducing the diversity of species that are growing on your land, specifically what we would call the weeds in the crops. Milkweed and the monarch butterfly is the most common example brought up. When you're killing off all these weeds so efficiently to grow your crop, you're creating a hole in the web of the ecosystem. In other words, there's all kinds of different species of things, animals, plants, fungi, lots of organisms that depend on things that we don't even look twice at for their living. And if you eliminate that piece of the web in the ecosystem, there's cascading effects. So if we say, well, we're just going to get rid of all the weeds on the farm by spraying it all with herbicide, we're creating an imbalance in an ecological system, and it's really hard for science to figure this out conclusively because it is so complicated, these ecosystems. So the jury's out on that one too, but there's cause for concern. One way that farmers that raise GMOs have alleviated that concern is setting aside conservation land where all of those species of plants can still grow. I know that this is a thing out in the Midwest at least. I'm not very familiar with it because it's not a requirement in New York. If you're a crop farmer and you want to plant GMOs, you can go whole hog and plant your whole acreage with them. Concern number 3, this is changing agriculture for the worse. And this is, I guess, my biggest concern because it has changed the culture of agriculture. We've taken ownership of the genesis of our food supply, the seed, and turned it over to big corporations who now own sort of the patent on life for most of the life that's grown in the U.S. It used to be that farmers saved their best seeds and replanted them. The farmer owned their own stock. Well, that's not so with GMOs. You have to pay the company for the seed and you have to pay the company for the herbicide. So farmers are putting more money in the company's hands. It's just like our reliance on banks in the agricultural system now, that the banks are part and parcel of every farm. They own a substantial part of the farm via the loans that farmers take out. I think that it's hurting the culture of farming. It's hurting that idea that anybody can be a farmer and make a living as a farmer when you're shelling out so much of your money to these corporations and these banks. Call me a throwback, but I think it's what's hurt agriculture. And related to that is the fact that we're planting much fewer varieties of things than we used to because we're over-reliant on this particular GMO variety. So it can be a repeat of the Irish potato famine in the 19th century, where the Irish were taking basically the same genetics of every potato that grew in Ireland just about, because you would make your seed stock by cutting your extra stock and then replanting those. Well, they had a famine because they had no genetic diversity in their crop. And it happened to bananas recently too. Bananas are the same way. You take root stock, you plant another banana tree. Now, this can happen. This can happen with the selected varieties of corn and soybeans and wheat that we're growing. These are our basic foodstuffs, and it makes our agricultural system less resilient when we rely on fewer strains of that crop. It makes it more disease prone, more prone to a single disease wiping out the entire crop. Looks like Dad's done raking. Left, and then the hedgerow windrow. This last windrow's on the north side of the hedgerow, so it's in the shade a lot. It's hard to get dry. I'll just feed this one to the cows right away. Well, what do we get? 1, 2, 3 with a hawk sitting on it. That's cool. 4, 5, 6, 7, and 4 foot in the balers. That's another long day done in the end of hay for this year, a real milestone. When it comes to GMOs, it's just like everything else in this world. It's complicated, and it's confused more by a lot of kind of false science that's out there, which is funded by who knows who. It's funded by special interest groups, and I wish we were still in the days when science was science and not science funded by so-and-so or so-and-so. That's why I tend to look for peer-reviewed scientific papers to get my information from, and to look for consensuses of scientists about things, because that kind of cross-cuts special interest groups. I don't know. The GMO thing is a tough one, and you don't know who to trust when it comes to opinion. You kind of have to do your own research and make up your own mind about it as far as what you're comfortable with. Oh, and there's one other thing I wanted to mention. I see it all the time where people say, well, you can't feed the world without GMOs. I have to disagree with that. I think that we can easily feed the world without GMOs. GMOs have just made things a little easier as far as the weed control aspect. I've read conflicting reports about how much it increases yield, and after all, we're making a lot more food now, at least in the US, than we need, and there's a lot less farmland in production than there was 100 years ago, so I just don't buy it. What I would like to see is farms that own their place and want to make their soil healthier and their land healthier over time. I just don't see coating the ground with pesticides and herbicides doing that. In fact, when we started farming this place and took it over from a GMO farmer, the soil was practically dead. There was no life in it. Now what a turnaround we see. And that's a healthy planet. Today was a mouthful, and I hope you have a happy Labor Day weekend. It's Saturday here, and I'm looking forward to a light day's work on Sunday and Monday. Have a great day, have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time.